All right, so for example number 2, we're still talking about the domain, right? And I'm gonna type some stuff up here. Domain. What does domain mean? Yes. Okay, and what is the range? Yes. All possible y's. So I think we guys are on the same page on that. We kind of understand that, right? It gets a little trickier when we get to like how we figure that out with the graph. So I'm writing this down. Some of you guys said, well, vocabulary cheat sheets up. So I want you to write this down in your notes. Domain is all possible x's. The range is all possible y's. So for example number 2, they're giving us a function. F of x is equal to 3/4 times x plus 2. So it's 3 over 4 times x plus 2. Okay? And they're telling us, consider the domain. Let me write that over here. A domain of x equals -4 to +4. Okay? So what they're saying is there's a relationship, and you could think of this in terms of this is y and 3/4 x plus 2. So there's a relationship between the x value, right, and the y value. And I think we should maybe take just a second and talk about that. How many of you guys remember what a function is? I've loosely said it's a function, it's a function, it's a function. How many of you guys remember what that is? Yeah, a function is a very specific type of equation. So I don't know if this has been taught to you, but I'm going to teach it to you and see if this helps you understand. So when we say f is a function, you want to think of a function like a machine, where my x value is what we call an input, and that spits out a y value, right? We sometimes call that an output, but for a very specific function, we call it f of x. So my x value is a number that I plug in, and in this particular case, my function is 3 over 4 times x plus 2. Okay? So I'm going to plug in a number for x, do some math. Think of it like a machine that makes something. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to plug in a value for x. I'm going to plug that value of x into my function or machine. It's going to do some math, and then it's going to spit out a number that we call y. So there's a mathematical relationship between x and y. There's an input that goes in, and there's an output that comes out. Okay? Now, what they're asking us to consider is somehow figure out what that looks like, how that works, when we consider the lowest value of x to be -4 and the highest value of x to be +4. In other words, they're saying let x be between -4 and, is that thunder? Oh, that's construction, right? And positive 4. So what they're saying is we want you to plug in the values for negative 4 all the way up to positive 4. And we're going to only focus on that part of the function. We're only going to focus on that part of the graph. Yes. It's in the textbook. Okay? It's in the textbook. And they want us to graph that. They want to know what that graph looks like. Okay? Yes. Yeah, it's in the textbook. They're saying, what does the graph look like when our domain is from negative 4 to 4? So let's open up our calculators, or turn them on. I got to open mine up. Okay? And so we're going to graph this. So what I want you to do, what's the button we hit to graph something on these fancy things? Yes. Y equals. Does everybody know where the Y equals button is? Okay, click that. I've got some stuff left in there from yesterday. I'm going to hit the clear button. Okay. Does everybody have the screen like this? Yeah. Okay. Make sure you have the calculator in your hands. I want you to plug this in. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to say 3. Wait, let me back up. Let's plug this in as 3/4. Now, on your calculator, and tell me if you have this, see the X button right here? Do you have in green a little box over a box? No. Above the X. It's only on the newer one. Okay, there's another way to do it. I'll show you how. So if I ever want to enter in a fraction on these calculators, go to math. See the math button right here? Okay, do you guys have something like this? All right. So what do you think this last thing over here means? Fraction. So take the right arrow and slide over till you get to fractions. Okay? Now this first one, option number 1, is going to put in a fraction box over a box so we can enter in a fraction. So you could either hit enter or hit 1. Okay? Now do you see how I have that little box over the box? Raise your hand if you don't get this. Raise your hand if it doesn't come up on your calculator, or if Mr. Adams went too fast. Did everybody find it? Okay. So I'm going to plug in 3. Then to get to the bottom, what do you think I hit? Yeah, I'm going to hit the arrow going down, and then I'm going to plug in 4. Now, how do I get out from the fraction? Yes. Yeah, I'm going to hit the button to the right. A lot of people were pointing their thumbs to the right. So I'm going to do that. Now, based on the equation, I need to put an X. Do you guys see the X button right here? Click on that. And then it says plus 2, right? Plus 2. Okay? So what I'm going to do is this calculator is going to calculate all the values of y based on us plugging in certain numbers for x. So hit enter. Okay, do you have this on your screen? So now what I'd like for you to do is see the button graph. Don't hit graph. Look at it. What word is above the graph button? Table. How do you think I access the table? Second table. So hit second table. Okay. Notice that it kicks out some fractions. Well, what I need to see is when x equals negative 4 to x equals positive 4. So I'm going to hit the up button. I hit second graph button. Okay? And I'm going to take I'm going to make you guys write this down, but I'm going to take a screenshot of this. Hold on. Let me do this, and I'll explain to you what I need you to do. So you guys are going to make one table of values. Let me make it a little smaller. So write this table of values down, okay? I'll zoom back in, I guess. Well, you can see it from your calculator, right? So I'm going to come around. Some people have some questions, but I want you to copy this table of values around. And if you weren't able to see this on your calculator, raise your hand. I'll come home with you. Yep, that's what I have. Okay. Is everybody able to access the table on the calculator? If not, raise your hand. I'll come by and show you. I think everybody's got it. Yeah. Okay. That means you probably just put it, maybe it had a little mistake. So if we go back to y equals, yeah, see, you got that sign. Oh, you should. No, that's right. So when x equals negative 4, y equals negative 1, when x equals negative 3, y equals. Okay. I'm just going to give you a second to finish writing that down, and then we'll explain what that means. Then we're going to graph it, and that is what they're asking us to do, is to graph and identify the range. So we'll graph it, and then we'll identify the range. Are you guys ready to graph it? Okay. So I'm going to take my time on this. What this is saying that these points, -4, comma, -1, exist on the graph. That -3, comma, -1/4 exist on the graph, right? These are all the x values, and technically these are f of x. And so when x equals -2, y equals what? 1/2. And basically what we're saying is I'm going to take x equals -1. I'm going to plug that into my function, which is 3/4 times -1 plus 2. And when I do that math, it's going to come out as f of x, which is the same as y, equals 5/4. Okay? That's what the calculator is doing. It's calculating all these values. Yes. Okay. Okay. parched. Okay. So this is the relationship. When I plug in this for x, this is the y. When I plug in -4, I get 5. So the question is, what is the range? It's 2 parts. Graph it. What does the graph look like? And what is the range? Now, we could do this on our graphing calculator. You'll have to sketch it out. But what I'd like for you to do is on your graphing calculator, click on Window. See this button that says Window? See that one here? It's the second one on the top row, second one from the left. Click on that. What is our minimum x value according to the notes? Well, on the calculator right now we have -10. But what does this example problem want us to have as a minimum value for x? -4, right? So we're going to change this. The negative symbol on your calculator is right here. Okay? You see that? So I'm going to hit -4. Now, if you accidentally hit the minus sign, you'll get an error. So make sure you're using this negative symbol down here. Your calculator has 2 symbols. One is for subtracting and one is negative. Yes? Yep, I just typed in -4. You move the arrows, use the cursors, use the arrows to move around to where you need to be. And then what is the maximum x value for this particular problem? Well, right now on the calculator it says 10, but for the problem we're doing, what is the maximum x value? 4, right? So I'm going to hit clear, and I'm going to plug in 4. Does that make sense? All right, so now when I hit graph, so before we hit graph, do you guys have this plugged in like this? So just to recap, our problem, our example that we're doing, they're saying the domain, the x values we're looking at, go from -4 to +4. We're telling the calculator only show on the graph where x is -4 to +4. Does that make sense? Now, let's hit the graph button. Okay? See that graph button? So when x equals -4, this has a coordinate. What is it when you look at your table on your paper? What is x? No, it's not negative infinity. What is the actual value at -4? Look at your table. Huh? I can't hear. -1. So you know how you could double check that? I want you to hit the trace button. So the button right next to the graph says trace. When I hit trace, I have this cursor. What is that calculator telling me right now? Very good. When x equals 0, y equals 2. And when you look at the graph, that's the point on the graph, right? 0, 2, right? So, if I hit negative and 4, notice as soon as I hit, and you guys do it too, hit the negative symbol, hit this symbol right here. As soon as I hit negative, this screen pops up and it says x equals -4. Well, I plugged in -4. Now, when I hit enter, it's going to move that point on the graph to where x equals -4. So go ahead and hit enter. And guess what? It's -1, right? Is that what the table of values says? Yeah. What about when x equals -3? Go ahead and plug that in your calculator. Hit -3 right from the screen that you're at right now. Just hit -3. and then hit enter. Okay. So when x equals negative 3, our answer, our y value, is negative 1/4. Is that what we have written down in our table of values? What happens when Mr. Adams enters in negative 2? Can you tell me what the corresponding y value is? Yes. Do you have a question? No. Oh, okay. So I'm going to pause right there. How do you feel about the relationship of plugging something in for x and getting a y? Thumbs up if you feel good about it. Okay. Thumbs down. That's okay if you don't feel good about it. Let me ask some more specific questions. Is doing it in the calculator making it harder? It's okay. The more we do it, hopefully, you'll get to a point where you guys really missed out on this. This is stuff that's normally taught during Algebra 1, and we kind of reinforce it in geometry, and that's probably when we were shut down. Were you guys in school when they did Algebra 1?
That was our freshman year.
Yeah. Did you have school that year?
Well, COVID started when we were in 8th grade.
Yeah.
For most of us, so that year it was kind of like back and forth.
Yeah.
Online school.
It's okay. It's okay. We'll figure it out. Yeah. Yes.
Also, I guess why this is a little confusing is we were never taught how to use this calculator.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So we're going to teach it to you. We're going to teach it to you. Okay.
I never knew how to enter a fraction. I always just
It's okay. You guys, unfortunately, and it's not your fault. You missed out on all that. We'll go over that and teach it. So, anyways, so I think we're going to be okay. So what I want to do is I'm going to come out of that. I'm going to take a picture of this, and then I want you to sketch this graph in your notes. So. Yeah, it's like I'm trying to teach you domain and range and show you it's like you're learning two things at once. And that's okay. You guys are smart kids. You'll figure it out. We'll just have to go slow until. And so what I do want you to do, though, is I want to label these points. So let's just label the points so you kind of see it. So right here, this point here is -4, comma, -1, right? This point here is -3, comma, -1/4. This point here is -2, comma, 1/2, right? This point here is -1, comma, 5/4. This point here we know is 0, comma 2. And then all the way at the end, we've got the point 4, comma 5. Okay? So the first question was the graph. We figured out how to get the graph on there, right? What was the second question? Do you guys remember? I've been talking a lot.
Do we have to build the graph?
Yes. What was the second part of the question? Do you guys remember? What's the range? Huh? You got it. Okay. That's correct. So the range is, what was the definition of the range? Possible y's. So over here on the side, remember that the range are the y values. So it's going to look like this. I need the lowest or lower y value, and over here I need the greatest y value. So there's two ways we could do it. We could look at the graph. And we could look at the graph in the up and down direction, right? Up and down. What's the lowest part of the graph? Yeah. -1. You guys see that? So if I look at the graph visually, I see the lowest point, the furthest point down is -1. But also, if you look at the table of values and you look at these numbers way over here, what is the lowest y value? -1, right? Okay, good. So then we're almost done. So the lowest value is -1. Now, what's the greatest y value? Well, we can look at the graph. What's the highest part of this graph we have on the screen? Yes, 5. Right? When x equals 4, y equals 5. So that's 5. Now, does anybody know why Mr. Adams put those equal signs there? Yeah, because we're including these values. In the past, our previous examples, we said infinity. Infinity is not a number, but here we have real numbers that we're including. So it can equal -1, it can equal -5. So the other thing that we could list is what we call the interval notation. So we could say that our range goes from -1, comma, to -5. Those are brackets.